Welcome to this brand new section. We're going to be animating in After Effects. So throughout this course, what I want to try to do is challenge you based off of what we've learned in previous lessons. So sometimes I might ask you to pause the video and do something. A lot of what we're doing in this section and in future sections, we're building completely from scratch. And I want you to get into the mindset of, I can build it from scratch in After Effects. I don't need a template. I don't necessarily need the project files. While we do have project files for some of the projects so that you can see exactly what I'm doing, in this section, we're creating everything from scratch. So what I want you to do right now is to start a new composition and make it 1920 by 1080 pixels and make it 5 seconds long. So go ahead and pause this video, do that, and then I'm going to show you how to do it if you forgot. All right, hopefully you paused the video. To create a new composition, remember we click this Create a New Composition button. We set our settings, 1920 by 1080, and then for the duration, I'm just going to choose 5. And I'll call this Animations. Next, what I want you to do is create a perfect square and center it to the composition. So again, we've learned this in the past section, so you can do this on your own. So pause this video, create a perfect square. How about you make it a white square and put it in the very center? It doesn't matter how big or small it is for this example though. So pause and do that. All right, hopefully you paused. So to create a perfect square, choose the rectangle tool from up top. Under fill or next to fill, click the color and select white, so it's going to be white. Now, click in your composition and drag while holding the shift button down. And that creates that perfect square, right? To center it, we have our align panels over here on the right hand side. So click horizontal and center alignment for vertical. So now we have our perfect square. Let's talk about animations. To animate in After Effects, we use what are called keyframes. Keyframes is related to the word frames, and you know with video we have frames. We set our composition to 2997 frames per second. So in every second of our video or our composition, there are 29.97 frames. So if you zoom in on our timeline really far, you can see each frame, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Get it? So a keyframe is telling After Effects that at one point in time, we want X, whatever type of property to be this. So for example, let's bring up opacity. Remember how to do that? It's T on your keyboard, or if you drop down your transform properties, you can see it under opacity. I'll just bring up it with T. So our opacity is set at 100%. Let's go to 1 second on the timeline. So let's go all the way here. To set a keyframe, you can click the stopwatch icon, this little stopwatch next to opacity. And you'll notice if I bring down all of the transform properties, and even if I dive into contents, you can see that some of these things have those stopwatch icons. And that's because you can set keyframes for many, many different things in After Effects. Again, clicking T to bring up opacity, click the opacity stopwatch, and that creates a keyframe. You'll notice that on our timeline right at 1 second, this little diamond appears. Let me move my indicator over to the right. You see that little diamond? That's a keyframe, and that's telling After Effects that at 1 second, we want this square layer to be 100% opacity. Let's go back to 0 frames or 0 seconds. If we click on our opacity and say we choose set it to 0, press return to lock that in place, what happens is we're telling After Effects that at 0 frames, we want the opacity to be 0%. So what happens between 0 and 1 seconds? There's this animation or this transition from 0 to 100. So if I scrub through this, you can see that it creates this fade on effect. That's what opacity can be used for fading on objects or layers. I can move around these keyframes, so I can click them, I can move them around. So if I want a longer fade for it to go 2 seconds, we can move the distance between the two keyframes from 0 to 2 seconds. And now our fade is longer. See that? Or if I want it a lot shorter, we can make it half a second, like so. I can delete keyframes, so I can just select one and delete, or let me undo that, Command Z, and select both and delete. One thing you'll notice, let me undo that. Let's go back to where we had just our one keyframe at 1 second. You'll notice that as soon as I change the opacity to 0, that a keyframe was automatically set. I didn't have to click the stopwatch to do anything. In fact, if I set our opacity to something different than the 100%, and then I click the stopwatch, what happens is it deletes all the keyframes. Or if we go back again and our opacity is at 100% and I click this now, it again deletes everything that we've done so far. So to create a new keyframe, once you've set one keyframe on any individual layer, all you have to do is change the value of that property. So if I drag this down to 0, that is set. Now say we want this to fade on and then fade off. Let's go to 2 seconds. We can set this to 0, and now we have our object fade on to 100%, and then fade off to 0%. How do we get this to fade on and then pause at 100% and then fade off to 0%? Well, we can either go in between these second and third keyframes and either change the opacity to 100%, or I can copy and paste keyframes. So I can select this keyframe, copy it on a Mac, that's Command C. On a PC, it would be Control C, and then paste it, Command V. Now between these two keyframes, nothing happens. It just stays at 100%. That's the basis of most things we're going to be doing in After Effects. In the next lesson, we're going to take it a step further and start animating other properties. And there are some key things that you'll need to know, especially when animating things like position. That's coming up next, and I hope you enjoyed this lesson.